We are holding this moment as a space for mourning for Palestinian lives lost. As of writing this, over 10,305 Palestinians has been murdered, at least 4,008 of which were children. I had to look that number up this morning because it has changed since last night. That is an atrocity in itself. Israel fully knew that they would be killing children, as 50% of the population in Gaza is under the age of 18. On the other side, there are elders being martyred who are older than the state of Israel itself.
We are here as Jews and allies to demand that Congressman Blumenauer support an immediate and lasting ceasefire in Gaza. We are here as Jews because our collective experiences of oppression have been cynically weaponized to justify the oppression of others. We are here as U.S. residents because our tax dollars are used without our consent to fund the continued genocide of Palestinians and theft of Palestinian land. We are here as Oregonians because Earl Blumenauer is our congressman, and many of us voted for him. I voted for him, actually, because of his progressive and his anti-war platform. And we are here just as people because we believe every person's life is equally precious. What a radical concept. And the preventable deaths of 10,000 Palestinians and counting only in this assault is absolutely unbearable.
So what I'm going to read to you all is actually writing by a dear sister and comrade of mine, Mayra Rios, who's a law student. So these are her words. It is important not to isolate the attacks of October 7th in a vacuum, devoid of the decades of occupation, settler violence, and oppression that Palestinians have been subjected to. I've noticed the mainstream narrative chooses to begin the history of the war on Gaza at October 7th with no further context. This is a dangerous narrative that overlooks the settler colonial history that Israel has imposed on Palestine for decades.
Congressman Blumenauer publicly touts his past opposition to the U.S. wars in Afghanistan, a rare position. He supports military aid to Ukrainians defending themselves from Russian invasion. It's very clear right now that if the U.S. likes a country, they can do whatever they want. They can kill whoever they want. And it's been this way.
Although scholars, journalists, and politicians today argue as to whether this war on Gaza constitutes genocide, history will provide its ever-reliable hindsight vision, and it won't be so difficult to name what is happening now as genocide.
Right.
At that point, in the not-so-distant future, I hope to be able to say that we, as a country, did something to preserve our humanity.
It's been quoted already, but it's worth quoting again. He said, in his recent press release, "I am deeply concerned for the safety and security of 2 million civilians in Gaza, half of whom are children. Israel cutting off water, electricity, medicine, fuel, and humanitarian aid has already created horrific consequences." He continues, "I hope the Israeli government pays attention to the president's words of caution to follow international law and responsibilities for the rules of war." Wow, he hopes, guys. He's really hoping. We hope. You're fucking elected. We elected you. You don't have to hope.
Vice President Harris said on social media this week that we need to preserve human life, dignity, safety, and self-sovereignty of the Palestinian people. How can this administration sincerely make a statement like that while simultaneously arming Israel with $14.3 billion?
He knows that the U.S. is not simply complicit. The U.S. is committing this genocide. The U.S. funds it. The U.S. arms it. And President Biden could get on the phone right now to Netanyahu and say, "Stop it," and it would stop.
Next, I want to welcome up some speakers that we have who are descendants of Holocaust survivors to share some pieces about this moment.
When I tell people that my grandparents survived the concentration camps, I'm always met with remorse. I'm always met with people being so frozen and not knowing what to say, and they say, I cannot imagine that kind of pain. I cannot even imagine what that's like. And I want to see that same remorse for the people in Gaza.
Yes. That's right.
I want to see that same remorse for parents who are losing their children, and for children who are losing their parents and their entire families, and for entire families, entire lives that have now been completely wiped out.
I remember my 82-year-old great-great-grandmother crushed in a boxcar en route to Auschwitz as we fight against the forced transfer of 1.5 million people in Gaza who are now internally displaced, being bombed as they travel along so-called safe routes to the south.
This lack of remorse is what concerns me so much in our so-called leaders. Because this lack of remorse is what made the Holocaust possible. It is what makes all genocides possible. This dehumanization is what makes it possible.
That's right.
What I find myself thinking about now is the stories they told me about how it was the people that they knew and cared about, that their neighbors, who they thought of as good people, who turned on them when the Nazis came.
I remember my 14 murdered and disappeared family members as we fight against the extermination of dozens of entire Palestinian family lines. And I remember little Bobby and Kiti and Ava, who were 6, 7, and 3 years old in my family, when they were murdered with the approval and authorization of the German state, as we fight against the massacre of over 4,000 children with the approval of the state of Israel.
What I just want to know, what everybody at home, these representatives, how do you think that you are any different than the people that sat by and watched the Holocaust happen? How are you different? If you want to believe that you would not have been a Nazi, then show that you're not a Nazi.
We are here today because we were taught to know in our bones that when a state can engage in the wholesale slaughter of 10,000 people, the bombing of hospitals, ambulances, schools, neighborhoods because of their identity, it is an existential danger to us all. That none of us are safe when genocidal powers are allowed to persist.
When will it be enough? I'm asking our representatives, when will it be enough? At what point, at what number will you say that it's now a genocide? At what point, how many people have to die?
We cannot stand by as another generation, another people is made to suffocate in darkness. We are here to say no. To answer the call of our relatives, of our history, as survivors, as those who remember. To say never again means never again for anyone, never again now.
Never now.
Ceasefire now.
Ceasefire now.
The public opinion has spoken. 66% of Americans, including 80% of Democrats, whatever that's worth, are in favor of a ceasefire. If the public opinion of those you were elected to serve does not inform your policies, then what does? Do we know what does? People are taking to the streets from California to Oregon to DC to demand a ceasefire now. How many voices is enough for our elected officials to listen and act according to the virtues of those they were elected to serve?
Do your fucking job.
I write this on the brink of despair for the human life lost in Palestine. Out of frustration that I have called your office and written to you and my other elected officials multiple times, echoing the wishes of the majority of Americans, and still no ceasefire. I write this because I can't keep watching the death toll climb during an active genocide while I sit behind my screen hoping it will end. Please call for a ceasefire now.
Ceasefire now. In hope, in prayer.